I want to talk about something I don't see a lot of people talking about right now online, and it's that there are a lot of business owners right now who are launching and selling and are noticing that they are doing everything the way they used to do it. They've even optimized their emails, they planned out their countdown timers, and they created even more content, and like they had everything ready on time, and yet their sales are actually going down compared to the effort they're putting in. So what happens then is they start second guessing the offer. They start negotiating about the price. They start thinking, oh, maybe I should lower the price. And they start doubting everything, including themselves as business owners and CEOs. But they don't look at the right things that have actually changed in the market. And so this is why in the second episode of this online business reset series, I want to talk to you about the new rules of the online game in terms of launching and selling and what you need to take into account, because what used to work doesn't work anymore, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to change your offer, although low tickets are on the rise as well. So let's dive in and let's look at what a struggling launch looks like, what's actually going on, and how you can fix it. Hello, and welcome to Fail to Win, the show where we love to make mistakes and learn from them so you can turn your passion into profits and live life on your own terms. I'm Amy van der Putten from FastForwardAmy, your host and coach, and I'll bring you a new episode with simple strategies every Tuesday. A struggling launch could be that you saw your content was performing. Maybe you even reused old emails. I do this all the time. I reuse my top performing emails, and I will not necessarily compare towards industry benchmarks, but I will just, I'll take the email from a year ago, I'll reuse it now, I'll optimize it, and then I'll look at the stats. And one of the things that I noticed in one of my latest launches is that the stats were basically all the same, but on the sales page and the checkout, the stats drastically changed, even though we did everything the same way. And it's because attention right now, clicks and views, are not the same as actual buying intent. So it used to be that when someone was on a wait list and they were, they were there and they were clicking, they would just check out. But in today's day and age, there's so much noise out there that people are hopping more. You could kind of compare it to the way people used to date and the way people date nowadays with Tinder. We are in a little bit of a swiping world, left and right. Is that what you'd say? I've only had Tinder for like 3 days in my entire life, so I don't know how it actually works. But it's like swiping left and right? So that's what people are doing as well when they are on your wait list, on your email list. So you have to facilitate that buying intent. So if you don't understand why they're not actually clicking checkout, you're going to keep launching into that gap. You're going to keep putting in more and more effort, and you're never going to figure out what you're doing wrong. So let's look at what is actually happening so you can start fixing it. So what's happening for a lot of people is that low ticket is selling pretty well. I'm going to record a separate episode about that as well. But they're products of like what we call a high ticket in the online industry market is anything above 1,000, right? So products between 1,000 to 2,000 used to sell really, really well. And for a lot of business owners, they are underperforming right now. So here's what's actually happening. First thing is what's happening is that engagement metrics, what I already said just before this, is like email click rates, open rates are quite good and people click through, but they're just browsing and they're not committed enough to buy. So if you're noticing the same, that you're saying like, hey, but my emails are, performing well, what's happening is that people are actually slower to buy. They're not as frantic anymore to buy because they also realize that there is an over offer. It's like you're shopping and there's only hot dudes. So you don't have to commit to one hot dude right away. And this has to do with reason number 2, is that the market is noisier than it has ever been. So AI has massively increased content output across every single platform. I already talked about that last week, but there are more launches, more emails, more reels, more frameworks. I even hear this from people sometimes like, oh, does this person follow your coaching? Yeah, I recognize it. And it's because obviously I've also taught people to sell and to launch. But what you have to know is you always have to keep evolving. So I'll give you an example. It's not enough anymore to say something exciting is coming up. People used to be able to get away with that in 2019, 2020, because almost no one was actually doing the whole hyping up a launch or something is coming up. Nowadays, everyone is producing more and faster, which means that if you have generic launch messaging like something is coming up, it's going to get ignored because people are just simply not paying attention to you anymore because there's 10 other people screaming for their attention. So if your launch looks and sounds exactly like every other launch the same person in your industry is doing, your audience has already seen it. So it disappears and it doesn't become top of mind for them because it's not because they don't want what you're selling, it's because you haven't actually made them buy. And so this has to do with the third reason we're tapping into is that buyers are a lot more skeptical and trust sensitive than before. So this is what I call the trust recession we're currently in. The speed of AI generated content has made people a lot more suspicious. So last week I was in bed, I was watching this weird video on Jonathan's phone because I try not to bring my phone into the bedroom, but he does. So, there's a workaround. And I was watching this guy make an underground chill room under a pool. And I guess I should have noticed it was AI because it was very, very obvious. But I think it took me like 30 seconds of watching the video. And he's like, that's AI, right? And I was like, what? Oh. So I didn't even realize. And I'm in the industry. And this is happening across the board. So people also know they can ask ChatGPT a bunch of stuff or Claude. And so when they see you producing something, how are they going to choose you instead of someone else? Is because, well, they're going to need more proof. They're going to need more specificity. They're not going to not read the small print anymore. They're not going to not know when the calls are or what the content is because they want a lot more certainty before they commit. Because what has happened in the past is probably they've bought courses in the past, they've bought programs in the past. Maybe, they were ripped off. I once paid $50K for a business coach who absolutely was like not a nice person to invest in. She was actually pretty mean. And maybe people have bought a lot of programs in the past and paid 2K and actually never did anything with it. And so 2 years ago, they would just buy something hopeful that would fix their life. Now, a lot of people have started realizing, like, oh, I still have to put in the work. But so you need a lot more trust and proof than you needed 2 years ago. And I don't want you to think that that means that you're not going to be able to sell anymore, because I do want to preface this by saying that the information economy is still on the rise. E-learning is rising, online education is rising. So you're still in a really great industry. There's just more friction at this specific price point, especially when you're doing like a pre-order on a new program or on something that's come up a couple of times. They'll just think, okay, I'll wait and see, and I'll wait. And so buying behavior, like the actual buying button, that has slowed down a lot. I've realized, I think it was one of my last launches, for the first time ever, I had more sales on a closed day than on an open day. So I think half a year ago, like 6 months ago, we wouldn't have the craziest frenzy at a closed cart day. Right now, we actually have bigger frenzies on a closed cart day. And we notice that people need a lot more time to think about stuff. They need a lot more details. And where they used to jump on the pre-order, like the open day, and buy really fast, we are now seeing an increase. Actually, not even just like on the closed cart day, but on all of the days that aren't necessarily the open day. People, or at least the people in my sector and a lot of the people in this industries I coach my clients in, are taking charge of the things they're purchasing. And I think long run, like short term, this might be a little bit difficult to handle, but long term, this is going to be really good because what you get is really high quality clients. So I just had, actually, I'm closing up the registrations for my Authority Accelerator this launch. This week, we're starting on Thursday with the first session. And it has been incredible to see. Like, I have definitely seen a decrease in the speed at which people buy this launch and the launch before that as well. But what I've noticed is that the quality of people buying is so high. Like, these are people who've bought something in the past from me, who follow programs, they trust me, they pay in full. I know I'm going to be able to really create a really advanced curriculum for them because I see that the people who are buying are people who trust themselves as well. So this is what you need to know is people are more skeptical. They are more trust sensitive. So that's also why I believe that sometimes I have competition in my market and I'm just like, they will burn themselves after a while. I've now been in this online business industry, I think like 7 years or so, and I still have clients returning, which for me is, I think it's the nicest compliment. Of course, new buyers are important, And it's the nicest compliment when someone comes back for a new program because they just trust me and they always pay in full. So, yeah, I love that. So if you're currently struggling to get those buyers in, look at how can I make them less skeptical? Which proof can I give them? How can I increase trust? So for me, that has meant publishing a lot more testimonials. It has meant creating a deep dive video of 12 minutes showing my program versus just, recording a 2-minute loom, actually, doing my best and not just going through the motions. Which brings me to the next point is that if you're currently noticing that you're trying to sell something and it's not working, probably you think, oh shit, it's the offer, right? But what might be happening is that your audience might not be at the awareness level your offer requires. So this is a shift we've seen in our last launch as well that we're closing this week. Obviously, selling authority is nice. And when you're a little bit of an advanced business owner, you already have an offer that performs, you have clients you like working with, but you just want more clients, you want more invites, and you want to scale up. Like, oh, I need to be the shit in order to get invited places. But when someone starts out, they're not thinking, I want authority. No, they're thinking, I need followers. Even though they might not need followers, they're thinking, I need followers. They're not thinking, I need an authority system. So this is why I was also very conscious of how I positioned my program in that it was going to be for an advanced audience. And I knew I didn't want to attract beginners. And so that's what I've been really happy with, is that we've attracted the right buyers. And at the same time, you do have to realize, if you don't want to create an advanced program like I just did, and you want to attract the masses, is that you can't just be selling the solution. I always tell my clients in the fitness industry, if you're selling a meal plan, you have to know that you're only selling to a really specific type of a very aware audience who already knows they need a meal plan. It's just like a figure of speech. But the 85% of people, they don't want a meal plan, they want to lose fat. So you got to talk about losing fat and sell a fat loss program, not a meal plan program, because a meal plan might be the solution if that's what you're preaching. But it's not actually what people are thinking when they're looking in the mirror. They're not like, oh, I should really get a meal plan program. No, they're thinking, oh, why do my pants not fit? So this is the easiest comparison that I could give you. So for me, it's like people want more followers. And I'm like, well, you might not even need more followers. You need to increase your trust with the people who are already in your audience and actually sell to them. But that doesn't sound sexy. So you got to sell what people want, not what they need. I would always say make sure your programs are delivering what they need as well, so they can actually get results. But you do kind of have to hook them in with what they want. And of course, never lie. But see what I'm doing there? It's like, I see this with my clients all the time. They're always trying to sell what people need, but only the experts or really aware clients in your industry know what they need. So brings me to the next point. Number 5 is launches, your open cart periods are doing way too much heavy lifting. And this is why I'm so happy I have my podcast and I have my authority, only for the advanced audience. But so the structural problem that I see happening is that where in 2020 you could show up with a new product and just sell it, and people will be like, oh my God, I've never seen something like this before, I will buy. Is that today there's so much noise. So why would they choose you? Assume you have a 2-week launch and you're selling something, you open it on a Monday, 2 weeks later you close it on a Monday. That means you have to create trust, create demand, convert all in the same week, or same 2 weeks, and tell everything you know about this. And you have to prove that you're worth it and that other people trust you and that you've gotten people results and the curriculum and. And so where this fails is that people don't actually know that they want to buy something from you. And the way I look at it, if you're selling as a founder personal brand, is that you gotta make people already want to buy from you even before they know what they're buying from you. And this might sound a bit weird, but so I get messages every day. Today I got a message from someone who's like, hey, can I book in a call with you or someone from your team? Because I'd really like to follow coaching, but I don't know which program is right for me. That is a perfect message to get. Obviously, we can still improve a lot in terms of having our potential buyers know instantly where they need to go in terms of our program. But this means she's like, I want to buy from this brand. What do you have? What is the right fit for me? This is great. I get messages like this every day. Emails like, hey, can you guys recommend which program? I want to, run an online business. I have a product, but I don't know how to sell it. Which program is right for me? really good data for our website. I will finally get around to improving our website. But so when you are expecting everything to happen in your launch, two things happen. One, you are missing always on content. Always on content is, like my podcast, my carousels, my quotes, like all of the things you just see happening all the time. This is my whole authority system, actually. And two is that you're not ramping up towards your launch. So I made a debrief of our last 5 years of launch learnings, because after every launch, I create a debrief. And so I have this huge document. Oh, I should really give you that document. I don't know if I could do that. My team is going to kill me if I create another lead magnet. I had something else prepared for you. Let me think about this. But so I have all of these launch learnings, and they're a lot, right? So when I look at those launch learnings, the number one mistake we have made, and if I don't pay attention, I'll make it again because I go too fast, is that we don't prime enough. So many people underestimate that the sale is actually happening often before the launch. You're selling yourself, you're selling your vision, you're selling your social proof. A lot of the weight, the heavy lifting is happening before the launch when you're building up trust and prime. And I basically look at it as foreplay. I know guys don't struggle with this. I'm going to stereotype here, but as a woman, you often need a lot more foreplay. I'll always tell my clients, the better the foreplay, the nicer the orgasm. Yes, this is still a business podcast. But I'll tell my clients, like, the better the foreplay, the nicer the orgasm. And so what that means for your sales is the better the prime, the better the sales. So I think I made my point. Your launch week is when you're harvesting. But if you didn't plant the seeds the weeks before, and I don't mean that in a dirty way, there's going to be nothing to actually harvest. Okay, last reason your launch might be underperforming and what you can do about it is that promotion fatigue is real right now. People recognize the pattern. They know the webinar, you know, will be ran again, or they know that a pre-order doesn't sell out every spot on the wait list. They know sometimes websites lie about their countdown timers. And so they've seen it all, and they know they can also email to make an exception. So they act a lot less impulsively. There's a lot less buying frenzy, what I already said, and they will also act more strategically. And honestly, those are also the people you want as your clients. You want people who are actually mindful of the decisions you're making, especially if you're in the coaching industry like me. I don't want people to make a half-assed decision and not know what they're buying. I want them to think about what they're buying so I can actually, coach them towards more success. I don't want these little monkeys just buying whatever and not thinking about it. So this does mean that people start delaying, and a delay is often a bad sign because that often turns into a no. So this is what you want to pay attention to. And that's why I would say always make sure you are pre-selling a little bit. You're really warming people up. You're really talking to people. In one of my last launches, I noticed almost every single person who bought, I had a personal interaction with. That could have been through a webinar. That could have been because it was a past client. That could have been because they sent me a question and I sent a voice note back. And I think there's so much shit online about scaling. But if you look at the really big names, even someone like Pat Flynn, he will tell you a lot of the scaling is happening in micro conversions. Look at Jasmine Star, for example. I was on a call with Jasmine last year, and I saw her post last week. What did she post? Oh, yeah, she was replying to every single comment on an Instagram post that went nearly viral personally with voice notes. And I was like, this is someone who's scaled an amazing business, and she's also still personally replying. I think people put way too much stock in scaling and making it independent from themselves. And they should be putting a lot more effort into actually making it more personal and more micro touch points with people. So yeah, let's look at how we can shift this, right? Because these are a lot of the reasons you might be nodding yes right now. Let's recap this and let's go at a couple of shifts we can make to turn your launches into more success. So if I summarize this in just a couple of bullets, your launch probably underperformed because 1, your audience was curious but not convinced yet. Foreplay wasn't good enough. 2, the market is super flooded with similar content, so you're not standing out. 3, trust is a lot lower. People are skeptical and friction to buy is higher. 4, the launch was doing way too much heavy lifting. And 5, your offer was positioned above where your audience was at. Or I would say, you were trying to sell the solution and not the transformation or the desire. That's a big one. And last but not least, promotion fatigue is real. Um, and so people are fed up with sales content. That's actually just the way it is. They're fed up with it. So let's look at how we can shift this. What does a launch look like that actually converts? Well, I think the biggest thing here, and something that has helped me a lot, especially when I notice my sales going slower, just like my mentor says, when your sales are going slower and you have to pivot in a launch, don't pivot your plan, pivot your messaging. Um, and what I always ask myself, let's say I open a cart and I'm a bit disappointed by the speed of sales coming in. And I've had so many clients who have had this happen as well, is you get sad, right? And you start doubting yourself. You're like, oh, fuck, is this not going to work? Shit, I prepared for this. And so one thing I always do, and I'm always brutally honest with myself, I ask myself, Amy, would you have bought from yourself? If the answer is no, why would I expect someone else to buy from me right now? And here are a couple of questions you can ask yourself, or beliefs you want to facilitate. 1, the problem you solve is real and urgent for them right now. What is a really urgent problem right now for someone? 2, you are the right person to solve it for them. Why are you the right person to solve it for them? And 3, does the investment make sense given the transformation? These beliefs are not built inside of your launch week or your open cart. They're built in the 4 weeks or even longer before you ever mention a price. This is why I am so happy with my podcast. And in full transparency, I'm now talking to you. I'm talking to you about my launch closing. I'm talking to you about my podcast. But if you listened to my last episode, you also heard me say I'm actually in Australia with friends right now. I'm literally looking outside at the mountains, and so I'm not on a vacation this week. I actually had a lot of work on my plate this week, and my boyfriend as well. But our friends, they were going on a skiing trip, and they kept asking us, "Do you want to come skiing? Do you want to come skiing?" And one of my biggest values is freedom, friends, and family. So, um, like 2 weeks ago, I was like, okay, sure, we'll come. We'll drive there. And so today I'm recording the podcast. My friends were like, oh, so is this a podcast for next week? I was like, no. Today is March 18th. This podcast is a month out. But this is why I love my personal authority system, is because I always have content going out. And when I'm in a group of people who pay me anywhere between 2,000 to 40,000 euros to work with me, and I ask them, if you've ever listened to any of my podcasts before buying from me, raise your hand. Over 80% of people raise their hand. When I now look at launch data, we see that lead gen events have become more important than ever. We recently did a launch where 80% of the buyers had followed our live lead gen event. And so I'm a really big fan of looking at what is a 10x in my business. And I notice that when people listen to me, when they consume my information, they've listened to a podcast, they've heard me ramble. I will say in my programs, I'm a lot more structured than in my podcasts, but they've heard me ramble, they've heard me laugh and make weird sex jokes. They're not going to be surprised when I take the first 10 minutes of a session and tell this crazy story that just happened to me. And then I'll show them a system or something. Like, those are my ideal clients. When people have a live event, I can convert them really easily. All of that happens way before I actually say, hey, do you want to buy from me? So what I was saying in a very roundabout way, and telling you about the trees I'm currently staring at, is that my podcast does a lot of the heavy lifting. And I've often thought, the downloads aren't that high. I don't go viral with my podcast. I'm not Stephen Bartlett. But I'm not even building a media company right now. I'm building a trust system. And my podcast that comes out every single week, like for years now, is a massive trust builder. So I can now launch a sale without doing a lead gen event beforehand, because I'm always doing lead gen, because I'm always showing up and increasing trust. But this is where the gap is for so many entrepreneurs. And to be frank, this is the gap between making 6 and 7 figures. Is when you make 6 figures, you show up when you want to sell. When you're making 7 figures, like, you're always showing up, and also you're always selling. You can't just, I know there are brands that are the exceptions. And this doesn't mean you have to be online every day or you have to be glued to your phone. It just means you need to earn the trust from your audience. And I think if you wouldn't buy from you, why would someone else buy from you? And what can you do to go and earn that trust? So I think that brings me to my point actually, is that if we're looking at AI as well, because I know a lot of people are into AI and I love AI, and I joke and I say I sleep with Mr. AI because my boyfriend is very much into AI. Um, AI can write your launch emails, but it cannot build the trust that makes people open them. You're a human. You have stories to tell. You have proof to give. Use it. So use AI to build more pre-launch content, to build, to distribute it faster, to, do market research and all of that. But just don't forget that you need to create the belief and you need to put out the value. I'll give you an example. A lot of people are saying value content is dead. I don't believe that. I actually think educational content is far from dead because, yeah, you can read what ChatGPT told you to do and agreeing with you, or you can look at one of your favorite personal brands explaining to you why they think this is what you should do with their human experience behind it. And why are you listening to this podcast and not to an automated voice? Not because it was perfect, not because it was perfectly scripted, but because you have a certain belief in me and you want to learn from me, apparently, which, by the way, thank you. Um, Otherwise, we would all just stop talking to humans and just only spend time on AI. And I don't think that will be good for any of our mental health. So, what I said is in this online business reset series, we're going to do one action every week. So, before your next launch or before your next sale, or you're trying to make a sale, map out a couple of the beliefs you want people to have a look at. So, for example, what I will do is I will really look at which symptom is my client experiencing. So imagine I would try to sell a course about teams, which I have, but I rarely focus on it because the niche is narrow. I could talk about the symptom of like you being tired, always fixing your team's mistakes, or you being at your kid's soccer game on a Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m., and all of a sudden you see there's a mini chat error in your DMs, and instead of contacting your team, you're doing it yourselves. Or it could be that you feel the crushing weight on a Friday evening where you think, shit, I have so much work. Why am I paying so many people and carrying way more responsibility and still doing even more work myself? If you have a team, you've either recognized these feelings from the past or you're currently going through them. So I've just been talking about symptoms, and that's how I then create problem awareness. So here's what you could do in the upcoming 4 weeks. Week 1, problem awareness. So talk about a symptom like what I just did and talk about why they're like what the underlying problem is. Week 2, talk about your authority on this topic, your own journey, for example, what you learned. Then week 3, proof that the transformation is real, so social proof from someone else. And then week 4, transition into your offer. If you want to not do this week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, you could also just do this in 4 days. So you could talk about symptoms. Hey, do you recognize this? This is why this is happening. 2, this is why I know my shit. 3, hey, this is what I fixed for this person. Social proof. 4, do you want my offer? So you could use the first 3 days to ramp up towards then launching a mini flash sale or something. But if your content is not connecting to people believing into what you're selling, don't do it, because you can't force people to buy your system, your structure, your solution. You just have to help people buy into knowing that like they believe you can help them fix it and you are of value. And if you do more of this beforehand, your launch isn't going to have to do the heavy lifting. Okay. So to close up what I thought was going to be a 15-minute episode, I'm going to check the time. 30 minutes. Well, I am fucked for today for my recordings. I know it gets scary when you do a launch, especially if you've done it before and all of a sudden it performs less. But look at your own buying behavior. Look at your own stuff that you've bought and done nothing with. Look at how you are, seeing through other people's bullshit. Your offer is probably not the problem, but the messaging around it and the groundwork before it is. If any of this landed and you have a launch coming up, the Authority Accelerator is closing its registrations this week. The Authority Accelerator is not about launching. for a big part, we do talk about sales and everything that leads up to sales specifically. But the Authority Accelerator is about how you can do the groundwork and the lead gen and the messaging and be the person people want to buy from long before you're even selling. Because if you've ever walked into a launch and thought, shit, should have done more lead gen. Why do I not have more warm leads? If you've ever wanted to send out a newsletter systematically, but you just don't get around to it. If you've been noticing that the market has been changing, your sales have been dipping, chances are you need more authority. You need to be showing up more consistently. I do believe you can build a personal brand and you can sell from that personal brand without having to be glued to your phone. Like, I turn my phone off at night. I turn my phone off during the weekends. Like, even this week, being in Austria with my friends, I closed the launch. I had a really great 5-figure close card day. And I don't think my friends even knew what I was doing that day or that I was selling anything. Like, my phone was just in my purse. My content was planned out. I didn't have to do anything last minute. And it's not because I'm so disciplined. I know a lot of people think I'm really disciplined, but it's like I've just built systems around myself so I could catch myself, because I am actually chaotic. So I've started to just like build systems around the chaos. And now there's always content and I always have warm leads and I just have people asking to buy from me. And that doesn't mean I do fancy podcast recordings. I'm just holding a microphone here. Sorry if I messed up the sound. And I'm just showing up as me. And I believe you get to show up as you, but you do have to show up because there's too much brilliant stuff hidden inside of your brain. And if there's anything that's going to be happening this year in this, new online world where things are changing, is that you need to voice what's inside of your brain because it's way too valuable to keep hidden. So I would love to have you inside of the Authority Accelerator. As I said, it's a fairly advanced group of people. We're going to be talking about how you can become the number one go-to person in your industry. People will book you, they'll pay for you. They will not try to negotiate. They will not ghost you. They will be ready to buy. You won't have to do cold calling. By the time you get people on a call or in a DM, they're basically already ready to buy. You just have to score the ball. The link is fastforwardamy.com/accelerator. I'll add it to the description as well. And I would love to have you there. Okay. Talk to you next week, Tuesday, but I hope to see you first in the Authority Accelerator. Bye. You're probably listening to the Fail to Win podcast because you want to get better at business, marketing, and sales. And you want to pick up some new knowledge along the way as you are working out, driving, walking. And I so appreciate that you are here, but I have a little but, because let's be honest, free knowledge is good, but it won't actually always get you to implement stuff, because most entrepreneurs already know what they should be doing. They know they need to show up more visibly. They know that they need to create content consistently instead of sporadically. They know that they need to step into their power and their authority, but there's often such a big gap between knowing and doing. So if you're finding yourself starting from scratch with your content every single week, trying to figure out what to post, I can kind of guess what happens. On Monday, you post, you're so motivated. On Tuesday, you post. Then on Wednesday, something happens. And by Friday evening, you realize, shit, I forgot to post the rest of the week. How did this happen? Because I was so motivated. And I know that feeling because I used to do everything on motivation. And I thought if I can just stay motivated, everything is going to work out. With my fitness, I would get really motivated and think this is the year I'm going to make shit happen. And then I would fall off track. And then with my content, I would get such great ideas, spend way too much time on creating them. And then after a few weeks, I would notice oh no, I forgot to continue with my ideas. And this is when I realized that nothing basically sticks for me unless I build a system. And so many of my clients report the same thing. So maybe if you're currently finding yourself in this position with your leads and your posts and your sales, you are finding that every time you do a launch, you notice that you didn't have enough leads. Or maybe you only show up when you're selling. And this is exactly how my Authority Accelerator was born and how I built it for my clients. Because inside of the Authority Accelerator, we use my exact content system that I use to create content once a week or once a month, most often, where we build an entire content machine. You don't need a team. You don't need expensive ads. You don't need expensive funnels and complicated stuff. No random tactics. You just need a content creation system that turns you and your whole brand into a marketing machine that brings in followers, leads, and clients on autopilot 24/7, even when you aren't online and you're actually offline most of the time, because life is too short to be posting to Instagram stories when you're on the couch with your partner and they're actually really craving your attention. If you're interested in this program, go to fastforwardamy.com/accelerator, or simply click on the link in the description of this episode, or just message me on Instagram, message me accelerate on Instagram, and I'll see you inside of the accelerator.